All right, hello guys. Time for another Legion TD2 video. This one is inspired by God Forbid's quote-unquote tutorial on supporting slash pressuring enemies, and I wanted to add a few things to his tutorial, which is a sort of quote-unquote basic version, and to then try to explain how one can support a teammate in Legion TD2, especially in the early game. And essentially, what I wish my teammates would do in the high elo games or do in general, and what things to consider and what not to consider, and yada yada. Okay, so we're starting with a small presentation, and then I want to talk about a few examples where I think certain things went well and certain other things did not go so well, as in Drachbot and in Legion itself. All right. So, firstly, we need to talk about thresholds. So, thresholds are a very crucial part of Legion TD2, and maybe I think I'm using the word correctly, and I think this is sort of the common term. But let me quickly explain what I mean by a threshold in general, and then discuss the two very important ones in Legion. So, a threshold is a specific value where the power of something dramatically increases. And maybe you're familiar with like item timings in League of Legends or Dota 2, where a specific item, if you just have the components, it doesn't have its active ability, it has less stats, and yada yada. And once you assemble it to the big item, it gets very, very strong. Like think a Blink Dagger in Dota or a BKB or whatever, yeah? And we are going to consider two thresholds here before we deduce certain gameplay guidelines, and we will also talk about a little bit about risks and stuff. Okay, so first of all, Mythium thresholds. Um, and of course, a Mythium threshold is, well, say 100 Mythium, 120, 100 for Imps, 120 for Double Brute, 160 for Mimic, all these kind of things, yeah? And the point is that almost all builds on almost all waves, there's a typo here, sorry, are weak to specific Mythium thresholds. And typical examples are, say, a Brute on wave 3 is good against almost any build. For example, say Nightmare or whatever. Yeah, if you get 40, you're kind of fine, but somehow there's a Brute on your lane, and then you end up leaking very, very big. Or a Casket, which holds against 40 but leaks 100% to a 60 cent. Um, but maybe wave 3 isn't super important, but Imps on wave 5 or Double Brute is like essentially every game this is a threat. Mimic Ogre on 7 is a threat every game, especially with Aviator. Um, GK on wave 8, and so on. You probably know all of them. Well, Pack Leader on wave 8 as well. Yeah, depending on how fed the game is, what the builds are. But say you have an Iron Maiden build, and on wave 8 you also have some magic damage with, for example, a Pipsqueak or whatever. And you'll do fine unless they can send you a Pack Leader, in which case you'll focus the Pack Leader for the entire wave, you will not kill anything, and you're kind of fucked. Um, so it's very important for the opponent to hit the 160 Mythium. Okay. This also matters a lot in later stages, especially in the mid game. Think your double 4-eyes if the enemy has a Phoenix build, right? Else they can just easily split in such a way that the Phoenix tanks half the wave, the 4-eyes is never on the Phoenix. Phoenix just Giga Smurfs left hand side of the wave, and then they just hold way too good. Also, double Ghost Knight if they have Doomsday, because else, well, if you can just send one, they will split the wave. Ghost Knight goes into the split. Doomsday ignores it for the entire duration, just kills the wave, and then it's a 1v1 epic rap battles of history where the Doomsday fights against the GK and they leak 1 GK, or even full hold. Okay, this is the Mythium thresholds that I mean. Okay, so think 60 pre-income on 3 and 4, maybe even Dino on wave 4. Sometimes this is very important if they have a lot of pierce damage, right? Against an elite archer build, for example. This is sometimes relevant. Okay. And then there are gold thresholds. And almost all builds want to hit certain thresholds in gold. Typical examples are if you start Nightmare and have Oathbreaker in your role, you really want to push to 5 workers and you really want to make sure you can still afford your Oathbreaker on wave 3. And then the next threshold is, for example, if you happen to be very lucky and also roll a Butcher with it, you want to afford the Butcher on wave 5. But there are many, many, many other examples as well where you say start with a flower and then you have to get out, say, a berserker for wave 5, or where you need to make sure you hit your Zora for wave 6 or a Halo for wave 6, like these kind of things, right? And these are more examples: affording Harbinger / Violet on wave 5 and 6 when you're getting saved on, getting out a Bunk on wave 7. Like these are typical build thresholds, but also hitting like APS, MPS on your DK and yada yada yada. Or making sure you can get your upgraded tier 6 out for wave 12, 13, wherever you expect their big send. All these types of things are gold thresholds that you need to hit, and you need to make sure that you hit them, because else your build goes from being absolutely amazing on wave X to being absolute dog shit. Another gold threshold is really hitting an additional worker / avoiding being stuck on 40 plus gold, and this is one of the reasons why Nightmare opening in general is kinda meh in the first 3 waves, because you're stuck on like 47 gold on wave 2. And unspent gold in your quote-unquote inventory, or however you want to call it, is the most inefficient way to use your gold. Pushing workers is more efficient, as it A, gives you more pressure and allows you to hit Mythium thresholds, and B, it also gives you more income. And having more fighters makes you do significantly better against the next upcoming send. Which is why you should only ever shift gold if it is absolutely necessary. And this is why I also recommend to not ever shift gold below 2.6k or maybe even 2.8k elo. Okay. So yeah, this is a very important gold threshold. Okay, and now let's come to another very important part of Legion and how people usually get ahead, and it is risk taking. And what do we mean by it? And in this guide, I mean taking risk usually refers to pushing more workers than is considered safe. Okay, so for example, you are playing Nightmare, you got a send on wave 3, you essentially held, but now you're deciding, well, I could play safe and stay 6 workers for wave 5 or maybe 7, but I can afford an additional worker and I'm going to push it, accepting that the next send will most likely leak me significantly. Okay? This is very common with a lot of builds, especially around wave 6, 7, 8. You have a lot more freedom to take certain risks, where if they full send you, the next time they send you, you will leak significantly. Or if they full send you on a specific wave. There are different risks that you can take, whether it's usually what you send. So full sending, like sending a brood, resending a brood, blah, blah, blah. These are also risks, but I specifically want to talk about the worker risk here, because really, yes, it makes a big difference whether you send a brood or a fiend, and it really makes a big difference whether they hold or not. But the more significant risk when it comes to playing with your teammate is whether you consider pushing more workers or less and covering or leaking. Okay, so when is taking a risk good? Well, it's usually good if the enemy income sends against us, and sometimes also if they save. Why is it good if they save? Well, for example, if we took a risk and now we hit our Mythium threshold and we can leak them big as well, where they saved to leak us and we income sent, then we generated more gold and the leaks are the same size. Okay. Taking a risk can also mean shifting some gold on a wave to get a tier 6 out. So for example, the wave 6 kind of shift. This is also what I mean here. So it's not necessarily only the workers. I quickly wrote this up because I wanted to get the video out and I didn't really rehearse it or whatever, because I'm a little bit lazy. Okay, risks allow us to hit Mythium thresholds and also to scale better into the mid and late game. Well, clearly, right? We have more workers, our build is better, we scale better. Taking a risk on the same wave as your teammate often amplifies the negative effects if it doesn't work out. So, as the name suggests, risks can be bad. For example, I'm pushing one more worker than I should, and now they resend me a brood because, hey, haha, get fucked, bitch, and now I leak 60% to that brood or 70% to that brood. Well, that sucks, and it's kinda bad for my gameplay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is instantly lost. But if my teammate does the same thing, right, we're both trying to, so we're either trying to outscale the opponent by having more workers. Well, if we both leak, we feed the enemy too much gold, we can't outscale them anymore, and the king damage that we take gives them so much gold, they are now outscaling us. And if we try to go for like a Mythium threshold hit undercut kind of send, well, then they just get too much gold. So this is the explanation, as the additional king damage gives a lot of gold to the enemy team, essentially negating the gains that we could ever get. So taking a risk on the same wave as your teammate is usually not giving you much more gain team-wise, but it just amplifies the negative effects. So it's usually a bad thing to do this. Usually. I mean, of course, it's Legion. There are always exceptions to every rule, but I'm talking generally here, okay? And if you take into account a lot of things, then you will find a lot of situations where it's good to take a risk and to commit to a certain line and all these kind of things. But generally speaking, if we're just looking at it in a vacuum, risk versus reward, it's always, you have to balance these two things. And if the benefits do not increase by doing something, but the negative effects increase, then it's usually bad, which is taking a risk on the same wave as your teammate. Okay, so now that we've discussed these things, let's sort of get back to more practical gameplay guidelines. Also, one final note, risk-taking and playing lower value is also how you get ahead. Of course, right? If you have a worker more than your opponent, then yeah, you're scaling better, and then you're getting ahead. Or if you leak them more, then you're also getting ahead. So it's always this balancing between risk and reward. Okay, so guideline to being a supportive / good teammate, which I usually am not. Number one, and I see a lot of people trying to enable their teammate mess this one up. Make sure you send enough to hit your important gold thresholds early game. It is not worth it to just save for fun for like 7 waves, not hit any gold thresholds, then potentially even leak your guy once, but then yeah, you're out of the game and your teammate has to overbuild and you're a liability for the entire game. Do not do this. Make sure you hit your important gold thresholds. Maybe not on wave 8. Maybe don't send 80 Mythium on wave 8 if it gives you an additional worker. I'm talking about the thresholds like hitting 5th worker for wave 3, hitting 6th worker for wave 3. Make sure you get out your answer for wave 5, 6. Make sure you hit your T6 for wave 7 if you need it. Make sure you hit your T6 for wave 8. Make sure you can upgrade whatever unit you need for wave 9. These kind of things, okay? Try to scale as much as possible while threatening to hit a lot of Mythium thresholds for your opponent's build. So what do I mean by this? Why do I suggest that my teammate is trying to scale? Well, very simple. We're not winning the game in the early game. We need to play a mid game, sometimes even a late game. And if one player is just so far behind they cannot leak the enemy, or they leak to every send very, very big, this puts so many restrictions on us as their teammate to carry them that it is very, very hard for us to play. And it also gives the enemies very, very easy suicide lines where we have nothing that we can do against them. So you always want to still try to scale. But It's always in relation to the opponent. And now here we need to understand which Mythium thresholds are dangerous for our teammate and which ones is the opponent trying to hit. Is he trying to hit the double brute on 5? Well, then we should make sure we threaten him by maybe skipping after income on wave 2, on wave 3, maybe threaten a Mythium threshold on wave 4 ourselves, maybe not income king on wave 4, maybe not make wave 4 very long. Yeah, and maybe consider, okay, his build is weak to double brute on wave 5, so I skip so early that I threaten that I can get double brute for wave 5. So he has to respect my send and not just suicide push randomly into my teammate. Do not take a risk if your teammate is likely leaking next wave. Yeah, we all know the scenario. We get income send. Great, we can scale. Our game is very easy, but our teammate got saved on. Now, I am not saying you should not push a single worker if you get sent and your teammate gets saved. No, this would be wrong. We're still trying to scale. But you should make sure that you are not leaking to a resend when your teammate is likely leaking next wave. For example, teammate is playing a nightmare build. He pushed to 7 workers after wave 3. He got saved on wave 4. You got an income send on wave 4. Should you take a risk on wave 5? No, absolutely not. You should make sure you are a little bit overvalued to hold wave 5. You don't necessarily should play for like a giga cover. This is usually not worth it. You need to scale as well. It's fine if you barely hold. It's sometimes even fine if you leak 1 creep. Yeah, if they full resend you a brute for fun or whatever and you leak 1 creep, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But make sure that if you get a random DT resend that you're not leaking 50% to a DT. Unless your teammate is telling you, listen, I'm easily holding, do not play for cover. You can take a risk. Yeah, communication. But usually, do not take a risk in that spot. And this is essentially what I also said on point 2. If teammate is weak on an upcoming wave, try to threaten Mythium thresholds on your opponent so they cannot hit the necessary Mythium threshold to leak your teammate. Teammate is opening Pipsqueak. When are they weak? Wave 7. What are they weak to? Mimic, Triple Brute, Ogre. Okay, so now we should try to make sure the enemy cannot hit this Mythium threshold, or if they do so, that we get a lot from it in return. So whether it's enemy is leaking because they overpushed, or whether it is they had to save from 3 into 7 to leak our teammate with this Mythium threshold. Doesn't matter, but this is what we have to think about in our head. Okay, enemy is likely going 7. How do I support my teammate? It's very often possible to spot a weak wave before wave 7, say wave 5 or wave 6. And if we then push to commit to leak the enemy on wave 5 or wave 6, they cannot go freely to wave 7, so they have to send. Teammate gets a free game, teammate snowballs, teammate can enable us back, teammate can just solo carry the game. Right, and a final note that I often see, if the teammate is a lot higher elo, push 1 less worker and let them take the risks. And I know now this is high elo elitism or whatever, and you should always try to scale yourself and blah blah blah. Listen, there's a reason your teammate is, say, 400, 500, 600 elo higher than you. They are most likely better than you at A, assessing risk versus reward, and B, most likely better at building than you. So 2 gold on them is probably worth more than 2 gold on you. So it is very beneficial for your game and winning chances if you try to let them make these risky plays. And they cannot make these risky plays when you are already taking a risk on a wave. This goes back to the risks stuff that I talked about earlier, where it is not beneficial for you two to take a risk on the same wave. Okay, so this is sort of the very basic, quote unquote, this is what you want to do. And now I want to discuss a few examples with you. I hope this sort of makes sense on a theoretical level, but this is also what I want to stress. This is sort of higher elo thinking. And now, even though this sounds very basic, you have to keep track of essentially 3 or 4 lanes all the time and have to anticipate how builds will develop and how the game will most likely go. Because if you don't have this full understanding, you can't even assess what is the Mythium threshold that is likely to be threatened. For our teammate, for us, for the enemy, how are their builds likely to develop? Where can we undercut? What is our most likely line? And you still have to build your own things. What are my goal thresholds? Can I hit them if I save? Can I hit them if I power send? Can I do this? Can I do that? So this is, like, it sounds very easy in theory, but it is very, very hard to do in practice. But these are the sort of 4 to 5 basic concepts that are applied essentially every early game in every high elo game. Okay, so let's get rid of the PDF viewer and let's start with this example of someone who is very much known in the high elo community to disable his teammates, and it is Noob Killer 69. Let's go. And this is one of the examples. So he's playing Pipsqueak. He's sending a snail on one. Whatever. This guy is a champion cat opening. So what is cat opening in general week 2? Brutes. This guy is in trouble if he gets brutes. And usually one brute is meh, double brute is really where this cat suffers. Because never ever are 2 brutes being sniped. Okay? And especially with Champion Cat, what's he likely to do with 3 stacks? Well, he's likely to just giga push for wave 3 because he's super strong there. And then he's going to be weak on 4, 5, and 6. So we should be threatening certain thresholds on these waves. We can also threaten him on wave 3 and consider then, he has to overbuild a little bit. But typically, we really want to make sure that we can hit a brute on 4, double brute on 5, or double brute on 6. This is what we need to do, so this guy cannot just run away with the game and essentially ruin Red's gameplay. But we king up on wave 2 for fun. With 6 workers, we leak small. Great, this would give us the threat of a brute on wave 3 if we had skip, but we had to do a king up for fun. Okay, well, fine. Now we got a snail here. We are super strong on 3, we will also be strong on 4, we will also be strong on 5. We have the perfect setup to punish this guy who's on 7 workers with a champion cat, on 4, on 5, on 6, on one of these waves. There's essentially, once he's committing to 7 workers, there's almost nothing he can do. If he gets like giga bruted, or even a dino on wave 4 is a threat. But instead, we just income king on wave 3 again. Let's go. Now he's on 8 workers. 8 workers. We're 7 workers, yeah? So we're not even outscaling him. But anyway, we get income kinged. We're strong next wave. We're strong on 5. So now, surely we will start saving and hitting Mythium thresholds. Oh, no, we're just incoming again, while we're also leaking. Well, we're underbuilding. Okay. And now, yeah, sure, now we skip wave 5. But honestly, this guy is 260 value. He's like minus 100 whatever. And this wave is super long. So now, while he's already giga scaling, we skip a wave and then we just income king on 6. And at this point, the game is kind of over. While this guy, with his giga push, right, he has made sure he hits all his gold thresholds to push. Now he's income kinging. Okay, this guy griefed his build a little bit. Leaks here. Okay, shit happens. We've all griefed our builds. Now he's forced to build Green Devil here because, well, the resend could be very, very large. Could definitely be a brute resend. Brute resend ruins this build. And then wave 6 is a big threat. Big threats are imps and double brute. And yeah, he gets his gold threshold, he gets his big oath, but still leaks to the 140 cent, and this is kind of rough. And then the game sort of snowballs from this, and he's again income king, 14 workers, and yeah, it's just, this is not what you want to do. This is where you do not threaten Mythium thresholds and make the game hard for your teammate. Okay, let's look at this game. This is one that I've done a detailed breakdown on. Ink King, this guy, sending into blue. He is sending income. I'm not sure if this king up is correct or not, right? But I do like this income snail on wave 3 because it gives us the mask with the small slime. Because this gives us a much better hold if we were to get a full send here. So we are making sure we're hitting our gold thresholds. And now this snail here gives us an 8th worker, I think, maybe, or some threshold, maybe like an easier pilgrim or whatever. Yeah, it's probably, if we don't send the snail, we don't get pilgrim on 5 or something. I don't know. I would have to do some math. But anyway, we make sure that we full hold here with 8 workers, which is kind of greedy, but this is also a case where we know that our teammate is getting a lot of gold from this, and maybe you've even communicated this, I don't know, but teammate has rerolled into a pilgrim, so he will always do kind of fine on wave 5, and we get sent here, and now we are sending into this pipsqueak flower build, so this guy has to already care a lot about wave 7, and if we just starve him, our teammate is never under threat of the relevant Mythium thresholds. What are the relevant Mythium thresholds? Well, Hermit potentially for wave 5, but from this point onwards it's like Mole on 7, Double Brute, a lot of Brutes resend, a Giga Star for wave 9, and essentially, if we keep this guy on 6 workers, we always make sure that our teammate never runs into these Mythium threshold sends that kind of fuck his game. So we make sure that to a resend, we are fine here. Our teammate is taking a risk. He's the higher elo player. He's leaking 2 creeps and a robo to a single robo send. This is what we mean by risk taking. We're fine with him taking this risk because we're safe on this wave. And then this guy's so bad that we do not just threaten this Mythium threshold send, we hit the Mimic Brute kind of send, and we go full and we leak this guy. And now teammate does get a Brute resend. I don't know why, but he's just playing it a little bit safer because he knows this guy's forced to send. And now just look at, like, after wave 7, this guy's on 86 income, 8 workers, and teammate is on 11 workers and 119 income. So he's in a superb position to carry the game. And his next weak wave is wave 9. But given that blue is on 8 workers after the send, he's never under threat for wave 9. And then he will have kingpins. He has good mid game with Archer Phoenix. He's just going to scale. And we've essentially enabled him a lot. Another example of quote-unquote bad teammating is this one, and I've also called this out in the reviews I did. It's on blue. Right, blue is 600 elo lower than Atrocity, so it should be his job to let his teammate take the risks, whereas essentially he's just taking all the risks. And he's also sending a little bit too much. So, okay, he's pushing here, this is fine. I don't like that he's not adding a single unit for this wave because he's getting a 40 cent here, right? And he's leaking 33%. I would much prefer one less worker and add the buckler. It gives him a better wave 3. It gives him a much better wave 4. It gives him a good opportunity to push afterwards. I do like that he's only sending the 40 here. Yeah, he's threatening a brute resend, full snail resend. This is good. But with him pushing to 8 workers on this wave, what he's doing is he's forcing Atrocity to stay 6 workers. With Oathbreaker Harpy, he can leak on wave 4 for sure, potentially even wave 5. But he's the higher elo player. He would really like to be 7 workers, especially since he's sending into what he expects to be a Fiesta build at this point. And then on wave 4, again, we leak to the income king. and teammate had to stay one less worker. We're also full income sending, which is a little bit meh. But this is not the issue, yeah? I mean, us sending income here when we're pushing is totally fine, because this is only pre-income send. So we're still threatening Shiggy that we might be sending him a double brute on wave 6. We're threatening a brute resend on wave 5. But the issue is we're pushing to 10 workers. So again, Atrocity is getting a send here. He's the higher elo guy. He's sending into Fiesta, potentially. So he really wants to push at this point to get his game rolling so he can make good decisions with his gold. But we're pushing to 10 workers. So what's happening next wave? Atrocity is 485 value because he needs to get the Butcher out so he can cover if he gets a full resend, because we are leaking 42% to Snail King up. And now these leaks are rather small, but imagine if this had been a full send by what we expect the Fiesta guy. Yeah, if this guy pushes with Fiesta, this just is outrageously bad because teammate has to full cover and giga overbuild. And this makes the game for Atrocity incredibly hard because now it's very hard for him to leak this guy who got a ton of extra gold. And if this guy was Fiesta, he would probably run away with the game. I do like that we do send Brute Snail here. Like, we've kind of faked that these are full sends, and then we do go full, so we actually like really hammer down with our Mythium threshold. This is good. Yeah, we've threatened to get the Brute, but we have overpushed so that our teammate can essentially not snowball so well. And this pattern essentially continues because now we're gonna leak on wave 7, we're gonna leak on wave 10 because we overpushed. But then we still win the game. So it's fine, but I just think there are a lot of things that we could have done to help our teammate perform a lot better. And finally, let's hop into the game. This is a top level game, and let's quickly hop through this. I don't want to go to too many more iterations of all of this. Lucy is Fiesta here, and you will see a lot of income sends early game, but you will very rarely see full sends. This is a full send, because we expect the Pipsqueak to just push, and at this point we've expected the Quacker to overbuild to cover for fine taking a risk. But just looking on Lucy's lane, what's going on here is, okay, King up on 1, Snail because it's Fiesta, Lizard, but not a full send, because we do not want the Fiesta player to be running away with worker push. This keeps Lucy honest. She cannot just full risk on wave 4 and wave 5. Sure, this gives her a good Fiesta, and we would have liked to full send, but the general concept stays the same. This is like, keep her a little bit worried about the next send. So she only pushes to 7 and not to like 8 workers because she feels like she has to add the gate guard. We get a Lizard. Now you would say, well, we have Lizard, Seraphim, Atom, and with Fiesta we can full push for wave 5. Well, not really. This guy is on 9 workers. He leaked. He can definitely resend us 80, maybe even 100. So we have to be a little bit careful. We get 120 resend with Income King, but we had to add a Treant. And this is essentially how the game works. Fine is 10 workers, he's 70 income, and Lucy is, well, 40, but that doesn't really paint the whole picture. She was saving here. And again, now with the Pipsqueak, there's obviously a wave 7 send coming, and everyone is doing everything to hit the necessary Mythium thresholds. And then the game sort of continues, and it's a kind of interesting game. And on this wave, or next wave now, this is again where risk taking comes into play. Lucy is Fiesta. She's decent-ish on next wave, so she wants to take a risk. Dumbo the elephant is kind of good on wave 8, so he makes sure that he's not leaking there. He's also quite a bit under, but I don't think he leaks to a full resend here with the Giga Oath, and Lucy is just Giga pushing for a double brute, Mythium threshold hit resend. And Fine is reading this play very well and full sending, and so this play wasn't worth it, but it's not game losing because Dumbo the elephant is holding his lane. And then the game continues and blah, blah, blah. And it's a kind of funny, interesting game. And I might do a proper review on this one at some point or whatever. But I really think that if you go through essentially any high elo game, Mythium and gold thresholds dictate the decision making. And now I finally want to show two of my games very, very briefly, as this is already a very long game guide. Right. So this is a game where I was significantly higher elo than my teammate, and I started Pipsqueak, and I was really planning on pushing hard to really scale, especially since I'm sending into this slightly lower rated guy. I'm sending this DT here. Why do I send this DT here? Because it gives me Peewee Golden Buckler add with 6 workers on wave 3. Else I probably would have only sent the snail, but this gives me a very clean build for the next waves. And this DT only send. Now you might say, well, this is feeding him. You're sending him income on a strongest wave. Now he can push. Well, not really. I'm 6 workers. I'm going to push to 8 workers here, and I can resend him a brood, and this is what I go for. Yeah, he stayed 6 workers. He only pushed 1 of the DT instead of 2, which is, I mean, it's a good choice, but I've seen people push to 7 workers in this spot, then he would get completely ruined. I'm pushing to 8 workers here. I get sent again, and now I just say, okay, fuck it. I'm just gonna giga scale this game, get to 10 workers. I'm telling my teammate, hey, I'm taking risks now. I will probably leak the next send, but I think it's worth it because this guy's overbuilding, and I will just scale very, very well. And I push to 10 workers here. I send only the Fiend. Why do I only send the Fiend? Because now, in theory, I could go for 120 resend on wave 6 and probably leak this guy, so he cannot push so much. But, well, I don't have 120. I only have 120 if I get a send here and baby leak. So this was one of the options that I had, but given that there were no leaks, I just decided to go Fiend because I don't want this wave to go super long. I built like an ape and kite the mimic left because I'm an idiot. I have to kite the mimic right, then I do much better here. But even after this, like teammate could essentially freely shift on wave 6. Got the Avenger, is holding the full send, and now assessing incomes. We're on 105, teammate is on 95, and enemy is on 86 and 88, and we are not behind in King HP if we consider King ups. And this is why teammate is in a fine spot because I had a lot of pressure. This guy couldn't push so much, and I'm in a very good spot because I had a lot of workers very early. And then essentially they give us a free wave 10 send. They take damage. They go wave 12 for fun, and we just easily win on wave 16. And why do I mean I wasn't so I had some pressure, which is good. I was threatening this guy, kept him a little bit low, but I wasn't a good teammate in the sense that I forced my teammate to overbuild with this push here and with the next push. Yeah, I'm red under, I'm telling him I'm leaking next wave. I am forcing this guy to overbuild, and I am consciously making this choice because he's 200, 300 elo lower rated than I currently am on this account. And now there comes my large ego. I consider myself a better player than just a random Grandmaster player. So I just want this guy to play safe for me. And he does, and he gets rewarded. I mean, it's not like I am, quote unquote, just throwing him completely under the bus. I just force him to play 1 or 2 workers less than he could have if I was playing safe. But again, I think this is kind of fine with the elo discrepancy. And the final example is one of, well, do not take a risk when your teammate is being saved on. It's this game where a teammate is being snailed the entire time. And at this point, I'm pushing 7 workers. I'm a nightmare build. We have this pattern. This guy is champion Nekomata. Teammate is sending him on 1, 2, 3. He's not really threatening Mythium threshold so far. He's 7 workers. So I am going to leak on wave 5. It's fine. He can, like, it's not ideal, but I don't mind this too much. We're similar elo, so if he feels like he can really carry with his role, whatever, throw me under the bus a little bit. I have a solid build. I will be able to deal with it. So now he gets a send on wave 4, right? This guy's 8 workers. He has fed him so far. So what's going to happen on wave 5? Well, on wave 5, I am getting imps or double brute. I do not have a way to hold this. I did not want to stay 6 workers because I don't feel like I should be giga supporting this guy. I want to scale. 7 worker push with Nightmare Oathbreaker is the standard play. It's usually good. It also allows me to hit a Hermit on this guy, which is kind of threatening for him. It would be threatening if he didn't have Pipsqueak, the best unit for wave 5 in the game currently. And then this guy, what does he do? He should just stay seven workers in this spot, yeah? Or just add a unit that's really good for wave 5. But what happens is he brute double snails. He doesn't even get the double brute, which he really needed to leak this guy huge. So the 8th worker didn't give him a Mythium threshold, but he leaks 42% to a DT. I leak 47% because he got Imp Snail. If I just get a single Brute and two Snails, I do much better. It's probably only a yellow leak, and my guy has Pipsqueak, and so the full set isn't really good. But I really dislike the fact that he's leaking to Income King here while I get saved on and will clearly leak here while he's not hitting his Mythium threshold. And then this makes the game hard, then I'm tilted and I take a risk like a fucking ape. Of course he's gonna resend, and then the game goes downhill from here, and it's rough. I should play this much better. I mean, this is not an excuse, but I still think this decision making for wave 5 from monks in this case is really making my game unnecessarily hard. All right, so very long video. Sorry for a lot of yapping, but I hope that at least in theory this makes sense, and I really hope that I could show in a few examples what I mean by this theoretical discussion. Let me know if you have any questions, and see you later.